This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first, like to check the date of the big game first before you accidentally buy tickets on your 20th wedding anniversary and have to spend the next 20 years of your marriage making up for it. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
Ampire. Hey babies, hey babies, hey babies. Hi everyone, hi everyone, hi everyone. Happy Friday. Happy no football this week as we head into Super Bowl week. I'm heading down to New Orleans next week, Radio Row, so you'll hear me from there with whatever guests we end up getting. Should be a really fun week as we head into Chiefs and Eagles, Super Bowl 59 down in New Orleans. As for today, no Callow today, but we're going to start with my weekly visit with John Keim from ESPN, John Keim Report, as we wrap up the season and look ahead for the Commanders and all the decisions they have coming over the next couple of months. Time now for our weekly visit with John Keim of ESPN and the John Keim Report, and this is going to be the last weekly visit for some time. Not that you won't hear from John for a while, but I'm going to give him a break because I don't know, John. I started to believe we were going to have one more of these next week in New Orleans. I don't know about you, but I don't know. Was I pulling the wool over my eyes after that result last week, or you were with me, right? Like this was karmically, it just felt like, I don't know, like it was more than a reasonable chance that they were going to win last week.
I left Detroit thinking they're going to the Super Bowl. It was just because, like, I don't know how, but they're going to find a way to get, to get there. Logically, I kept saying, like, it doesn't make sense because the Eagles are just better. When you look at the rosters and you compare, just better, but there's something about this team. And, and obviously part of that is Jane Daniels. Another part of that is the belief and the mindset they have that they just find a way. So, yeah, I thought we'd be down in New Orleans and, but like as you and I talked about, like if Jalen Hurts wasn't 100%, or not even 100%, but if he wasn't able to really be effective with his legs, that changes things. Well, he was able to be effective. And then the other thing you don't count on are the turnovers. And that changed everything. To me, the first turnover helps put them in a 14-3 hole, and they never could quite dig out of that.
Yeah. How bothered are you by the score? Like, what is it? What kind of lingering effect do you think that has on what was an incredible season that they had?
Yeah, it shouldn't have a lingering effect because sometimes, stuff happens. And, they did not – I think if they had done that without turnovers and they just looked really bad, I'd be more concerned. Some of that clearly was on turnovers, but I also think it highlights that they have to improve that defense.
Yeah. Because
if they weren't causing turnovers – they're not stopping people. So that has to change. So, I think I wouldn't, it's funny because Bram, because I was talking to one of the players and like the fact that it was a lopsided score really, ticks him off. And like, he's like, that's going to motivate me this off season. He said if it had been a close loss, like you feel like, okay, it was a fight, you got out of it. But I think they were bothered because it's like, that's not who they are. That's how they feel. And I agree with that. But that's why I say like, you have to step away and look at the season as a whole, not just that game, because they beat this team a month and a half ago, and so it's not like they were in the game in the first meeting and they were in the game this meeting in the fourth quarter. They're driving, they're down 11 and then they fumble again. So, it got away from them, but I will go back to what that game should highlight is the need to improve defensively. You cannot just say it wasn't your day. I think offensively you can say that and you still look to improve, but defensively you've got to look at that hard because they just weren't good enough against the run all year. So that game kind of summed that one up.
Yeah. I also, in reflecting on it, I keep looking at Philadelphia. And there hasn't, I guess them and the 49ers, the only ones that have been like this in the NFC, but none of them have won anything, at least in recent years. The way that Buffalo and Baltimore and others and Cincinnati have to look at Kansas City, where you just have to get by them.
Right.
And I look at Philadelphia and look how young their defense is and how many of those players are on rookie contracts and how they don't have to make decisions about them for at least a couple more years, and they can still pay the offensive linemen at Hurts and Barkley and Brown and all these guys to have this dynamic roster. What they've put together, especially through the draft the last couple of years on defense, makes me believe this is the first of many between these two. If this team actually really wants to get where it wants to get to, they just stared down the team they're going to have to get by.
Correct. They have to 1,000% agree. That's the team that you have to give. And it's, first of all, it's in your division, and then it's also in your conference, obviously. So, and that's the way they've put it together is the way that this team wants to do it. Build through the draft, supplement in free agency or other ways. That's exactly what the Eagles have done. And, they've hit in the draft. And these guys had a good draft, but then there were other guys in the top 3 rounds the jury's still out. Luke McCaffrey, Ben Sinnott, you can't say that they hit on those guys. We didn't see enough evidence we didn't see it. We didn't see the play to suggest that yet, right? Maybe down the road. But the Eagles have hit. The one question I have with them, Bram, is just like a guy like Barkley, and they would be good with that, whatever running back is there, but they're tremendous with Barkley. How does he come back off after a record-setting year? I think that's going to be interesting to watch because he has the injury history, and you certainly don't want to see that. Like, that guy's fun to watch, but it's hard to duplicate what he did. But you can't count on that. So you have to match your roster building to theirs. And I think when you look at Washington's roster, there's more work to be done. I mean, this was always to get to that level. I think we all thought it would have taken another year or two of building. I just think that they accelerated because of how good Jaden Daniels was.
Yeah. All right, let me stay on the defense then, because obviously that needs to improve from a roster perspective. This is the way too early questions, but you and I have to think about these things constantly. John and Duran, like what do you think the future is for John and Duran?
Good question. I know with John that before his injury, they were looking at it 2 ways. Like, hey, he plays well, we can extend him, and we can spread out the hit a little bit more, give him some guaranteed money, and give him tack on another year or two and spread out the cap hit without being tied to some absurd deal long term. And I think like he had a pretty solid postseason, but you would still save $17 million if you released him. So then, Bram, the question is, like, are there defensive tackles in the market? There's one in Dallas that Dan Quinn really liked. He's going to be free. Is that a guy that they would rather go after because it'd be cheaper? He's younger, and you can still set yourself up with the interior stuff. But
that's Osa. You're mentioning Osa Odigizua.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Right.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah.
But when I look at their defense, I don't blame. I think people put a lot of blame on those tackles, and I would say they weren't playing at Pro Bowl or All Pro levels, but they're still solid, right? To me, the issue on the D line was more the defensive end and not getting enough productivity out of them, not setting the edge consistently enough, and needing to improve there overall. So regardless of what you do with those two, and the other thing is with them, you better have a plan if you're going to do something, because you're going to create holes where you don't have to. And I know a lot of people like Johnny Newton. Johnny Newton struggled against the run. And I think he flashed more as a guy that if you get him in a one-on-one situation, he can win that because of his quickness. Mm-hmm. But the double teams were an issue. So what is your plan if you get rid of them? And, you're going to have to then fill those holes if you do. I would be surprised if they parted ways with both. But at this point, I just don't know. And, again, what's the plan? If you go on sign some young guys, say, listen, similar productivity, cheaper, and you can spend over here, okay. But just to say it right now, you have to know the plan, because you're just creating holes where maybe you didn't need to when they have other holes to work.
John's contract is flexible, to your point. Like they can make some choices here. They could move on from him and have a major cap savings, actually, with some dead money, but a major cap savings, or they could extend him out, or suppose they could play him out. I don't think that's what will happen. They'll do one of the two. That's what I think.
Right.
Duran's dead money is high still. It's like $28 million for a year.
Right.
So I don't think he's going anywhere, and I don't think he's valuable off the season he had on the trade market if they wanted to do something. So I expect Duran to be back. Yeah.
So do I. I like I said, you can't get rid of both. Unless if you traded, if you wanted to trade and you get if you're going to part ways, maybe there's a trade market during the draft, just for some team that wants a guy for a year or two. Maybe you do something then, depending on what you've already done, and we'll know their intentions based on free agency.
Yes.
Because you can't replace them with rookies. Not if you want to do something. And again, Sheldon Day, good story. He's not a starter.
Right.
He's undersized, and he was I think Dan Quinn would call him a glue guy because of just his mindset, et cetera, and how he played. And he definitely helped, but he's not a starter. So if you you have to come up with two starters if you do this.
Yep. Okay, Bobby Wagner, where are you on him and his future
Bringing him
here?
back.
Okay.
I would bring him back because, it's funny. I think if you want to sit down and I know there's some people, wow, he doesn't move as fast laterally. Maybe not, but there are also issues with that. Again, I go back to the ends setting the edge, a consistent edge, and forcing a guy wider, allowing guys to get there, right? But in that, but he also made a lot of plays against the run. Because of his knowledge, because he he can play off double teams, et cetera. So I don't see him as a problem. I think the other thing that you cannot underestimate is the impact he has in that locker room. And I don't think you bring a guy back just for leadership, because if you do and they can't play, their words fall flat. And
this is what happened with Ron with who was it from Carolina? Thomas Davis.
Who he didn't have any impact.
Right, terrific leader, terrific tone setter, great pro. Couldn't play anymore. No,
and I think the one. So with Wagner, he still showed he can play. I think what you need to do though is you need to find someone else who can go in on certain downs, like Jordan McGee. Can he develop into that guy? They really liked him, and I think he's a guy that you have to watch in that area. But I would bring Wagner back because of his importance to that locker room, to Jaden Daniels, but also because he can still help you on the field. He's not, he may not be what he was, but he can still be effective. And I think you have to be careful, looking just for one quality. I want a guy who can run sideline to sideline. They did that one time, and they ended up with Zach Brown. And I had a coach tell me, one time Zach Brown looks like a all-pro, and the next play he looks like he's never played football. So you always have to be careful with that. Again, what's the plan if you replace a guy? That's what I always want to know, because it's not so much if you get rid of or keep, it's what's the plan to replace. But I don't see one. Yeah, I like Wagner. I think he's still fine.
Marshawn Lattimore's going to be back. He's under contract for 2 more years. They got him not just for this year, but for the next 2 years. The early returns here are very mixed. I mean, obviously, because he didn't play very much, and and then when he did play, it was a lot of penalties, and it was he got picked on. It's like some games no one threw at him, other games he got picked on the field, penalties, namely. Yeah. What's just your general feel on him heading into what will be a full off season with the team?
So they brought him in to defend guys like A.J. Brown and Mike Evans. He didn't do the job in those games. And I think there's no other way to put it. And the question that what I don't know is the lingering impact of those hamstring injuries and how it affected his play. And there's an impact, but to what degree? And that's where, so I'm willing to say, okay, we have to see next summer, next September, how does it look then compared to what it looked like, against Philly, for example, on that 4th and 5, A.J. Brown just runs past him. And when he turns, there's not a quick turn. And I've seen him be better in the past in that area. So was it a matter of this is where he's at now? Or was it a matter of, he's out there, the hamstring is healed, but he's not to where he used to be yet. That's the thing we don't know. And and I know, Adam Peters talked about next year. And the funny thing is, he talked about well, it's a new defense and all that. Well, that 4th and 5 was man to man. That had nothing to do with the defensive call or anything. It's just you got beat. And a few of those plays that he got beat on were just a matter of that. And then the holding penalties, the pass interference penalties, it was not good. And I think the other problem is if you're going to get beat on those plays, you can't be having penalties, man. You can't be getting into skirmishes if you're giving up plays, right? I mean, that's a bad look, and it's not who they've been. So he needs to play better. I'm willing to see and say, okay, let's see how it looks in the summer. Let's see how it looks early next season. Was this just about the hamstring? But then the other part of it, Bram, is he gets hurt a lot. Yep. So what's his availability going to be? If I'm them, I'm looking for another corner for sure. Now, I would do that anyways. Even if Marshawn Lattimore was great, I'd say I'm still looking for another corner because I want to strengthen that area even more and maybe push Sam Steele back inside where I still say he's a better fit. So yeah.
Okay, let's go to the offense. I think the tight end room is very interesting. You had mentioned Sinnott before. I don't think he, at least initially, developed into what I think they thought he was going to be. Not initially. We'll see. Bates is up. Bates is not a receiving threat, except for here and there. He's a blocking tight end. So they have to make a decision about him. And either way, you need somebody to fill that kind of role. If it's not going to be Sinnott or it's going to be Bates. And then there's Zach Ertz, who, plainly said in the locker room during cleanout, I want to come back, and I'm not retiring. And I thought he was a very, very good player for them, but he doesn't have an explosive element to him. So I wonder how you think about that room, which I think may have some interesting decisions around it if there's an explosive player that becomes available to them there.
If there is, then I'd take him because that's what, the one thing that they're big on is competition. And I don't think, and I even asked them in the postseason presser, how do you separate the emotion of the season from looking? We've seen teams here in the past they were tied to certain players because emotionally they liked them, and D'Angelo Hall, some guys like that. I felt like they stayed here a year too long because of the emotion of it, right? And you can't get caught up in that. That said, the vision I would have too is I'm still looking for another tight end. And if, John Bates does something that not a lot of tight ends do, not a lot of tight ends are just inline blockers anymore. But could you find someone who's a good mix of that plus a receiver, and then I would get that guy. And then you can use Ertz situationally, which is what the plan was for him this year, because situationally he was good. He was really good in the red zone. He was the most prolific tight end on 4th down. Now, part of that because they went for a lot, but he was the guy that, he had four fourth down conversions in the postseason. Yep. Jaden Daniels looks for him. So you can't that can't be dismissed, but I'm still looking for another guy because I'm not convinced in Sinnott. We didn't see, everybody develops at different rates, right? Nobody develops, they're not all linear and they're not all going the same time. So maybe he develops more in camp. Maybe it just clicks and it's different. I don't know. But I would look for another guy for that room for sure, even if you bring Ertz back. And I don't know that it would be that expensive. He's 34. He does like playing for Kingsbury. So I think if he's going to be somewhere, I think this is where he'd want to be. Although the way he talked, it's like he still wants to play regardless. But I know this is where he'd want to be because of Kingsbury and because the trust they have in him. But I would definitely look for someone else because you can't just run it back and hope that it all repeats itself. Like going back to Wagner, if he doesn't work, well, you do have Jordan McGee that they like. Maybe he develops enough where he can kind of start to take more snaps. But I'd look for the same at tight end because you cannot assume that they're going to stay as healthy as they were this year.
Okay, how about offensive line, which I think is way up in the air. They went from prolific run offense to non-existent run offense for the majority of the second, at least the last month into the postseason.
Correct.
Their depth was clearly exploited. You could see that as things went along. Because listen, guys are going to get hurt, but it was exploited by the end of it. So I don't know what to think of it other than I know Tyler Biotish is their center. And now with an injury to Sam Cosmi, there's just a lot to think about with the rest of the positions there.
I agree. And I think what we saw is that Brandon Coleman can play in the NFL. where is he best at? Clearly they could reach a certain point with him at left tackle because they did. But they can definitely improve that front. And so if there's a tackle sitting there at 29 that you like, grab him. You cannot have enough good offensive linemen. I think when we go back to the Eagles conversation, why are they so good? Look at their defensive line and their offensive line. That's where it all starts. And I like the skill guys here, and I don't think it needs an overhaul on the line, but I do think you can add another guy or two.
Yes.
Because you could get a tackle, then what is that? Is it a left tackle? What does that mean for Coleman? Could you move him to the right side, or could you bump him inside? To where Allegretti plays. And I'm not even saying you have to replace Allegretti, but I think you have to look at all ways to improve that front. And I mean, personally, I think Coleman would be a very, very good guard, but he's shown that you can win with him at tackle too. And I certainly don't put the blame on him for how he played. As a group, in the run game, they weren't getting it done. And why is that? And I know, you can look at Brian Robinson. I don't think he's necessarily, I don't think he's going to make them look a lot better the way Barkley can make anybody look good. But, and I think the Eagles line is good, but I think he makes them look even better. And I think Jaden Daniels helps the pass protection because of his ability to get out of things. But I would look to definitely improve. And the Cosme one is a hard one because how quickly will he come back? Is it a 7 to 9 month thing, which would be, typical, but even still, that's still pushing it to the season.
That's still September, right? That means
correct. Exactly.
No practice through the whole off-season training camp. That's all of it. So,
Yeah, no. Yeah, it's a tough one, but I think they're very big on competition. You cannot just rest on things, and I don't think they will because that's not how you win titles, and that this is what they purport to want to do, and I believe them. So I would definitely look to improve that group.
Okay, last topic, and I have to bring this up because I talked about it on my show earlier this week because Kevin Sheehan insinuated that the team was discussing. Yeah, I know. Okay, this is how I handled it too. I not with the clear disgust you have for this topic, but
it's a massive headache.
All I said was, I haven't heard a thing about them doing anything about the name and that it's not happening anytime soon.
Correct.
So right. Okay. All right. So you're on board with me because after he said this, I'm like, does he know something I don't know? Because I haven't heard even an inkling of a change to the branding at all, with the exception of they might tweak the uniforms a little bit. That's all I've heard.
That's what, and I'll be honest, it's not something that I'm checking on all the frickin' time. It's, I get it. Nobody likes the name and, everybody wants the old name. Listen,
that's not happening.
No, it's
not happening.
It's not my fault. It's not your fault. And it's like when you tell people it's not happening, they get mad at you or me. I'm like, it's not my decision. So I'm just telling you what the reality is. So you can save your energy because it's not coming back. I don't care who the president is. They don't have a say over that. So it's not coming back. So, it's beyond Bram, it's beyond ridiculous. But I get the disdain for it. I understand that. But I can't help what you hear. And I haven't heard that. The thing, I kind of ran it by someone yesterday and just just as a, here we go again.
Yeah.
And I haven't sensed anything at this point.
Nothing. I know.
And also and here's the other thing, in talking to people over the last couple weeks, someone even brought up, the fact that they're winning and this is now Jaden Daniels, he's a commander, how does that impact a desire down the road to explore it? And, and it was always a few years down the road. Their priority right now is getting that stadium site. And they're very much this is the priority right now. And I don't think you take on those. I think I could see at one point before the season, talking to people, you could see a rebranding of the uniform and going back to a more familiar look. I don't know if that will happen, but that was the discussion.
Yes, that's what I've heard about. This is what I said the other day. I said, what I've heard is there is a desire to look into the uniforms and tweak it, to whatever that means, tweak it. But I've heard nothing about the name. And they've only said to me over and over, first they go, do you know how expensive that is? And they were like,
Yes.
and then 2, they're like, do you know how complicated? And 3, it's just not on our priority list at all right now.
That's it. And like, even like a year ago, it's like maybe a few years down the road, if it's still X, Y, and Z, if it's still an issue, blah, 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 they're going to sell season tickets this offseason, not because of the name.
Number 5.
Because the name that matters is Daniel.
Yeah.
That's the name that matters in this conversation. So if the name Jaden Daniels isn't associated here, then they're not selling tickets. But if it, but it is. And so that's the key thing here. And, I know there's, like you said, I mean, I don't think people understand just how, like, I think they think it's very easy. Oh, let's just pick this name. It's not that easy because there's so much, I know the names that people wanted before, and it was, for them, it was prohibitive. Now maybe, they say, well, it's just X million dollars. Well, it's not your money, right? But it is very, very costly because then you'd have to make a change at all these places, with the signage, et cetera. That's a lot of money. Trademark battles, et cetera. Like, I think, listen, man, if it had been up to Snyder in the beginning, I do think the name would be Warriors, but there were trademark issues there, and then Native Americans would have fought that one. So, it's just a hard, because ultimately, Bram, too, if they change it, what's going to satisfy people?
That's right.
It's going to be, and I get like, it's not the best name. I get it. It's not. I'm with you on all that, but it's, I can't help what you hear.
Yeah, I know. I'm frustrated by it too, but it was interesting because like I talked about it because Kevin brought it up and I got inundated with people asking me about it, and then so I wanted to publicly address it because I'm like, listen, like I'm not going to answer 8 million texts and DMs and all this stuff about it because Kevin said this, and so I put out like the podcast. There was more reaction to that podcast than anything I've put out because people are interested in it. And I hear you on that, but all I can tell you is what I know, and they're not changing it anytime soon. And sorry to tell you that, I don't know what to tell you. Yeah.
They just went to the NFC Championship game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, but I get, like I said, I get it. I hear from fans all the time. Like, I get it. And Kevin, clearly has relationships with people, and maybe there's someone that he's hearing this from, and that's fine. And, it's not like I've checked this out a ton because I kind of been busy writing about a team and talking about a team that was in the NFC Championship game. It's not forefront on, my mind because it's not like, unless they're going to do it, I'm not going to sit there and chase it for 3 years to see if they are.
Yeah.
Because I have to devote my energy to the things that matter right now.
That's right.
And I know right now their priority is getting the stadium site secured. And that's where they're putting their resources, which is a lot of resources into that. And, I know people are like, well, you can walk and chew gum at the same time. Like, that's easy to say, but you don't know the work involved, and they do. And that's what they're in. And like, I'd say this too, this group has shown that you can trust where they put their priorities, because their main priority from the beginning was build a better product. And they did, then it was improve the stadium, improve, the practice facility. And that's what they've done. They've made this a desirable place to play. If they had changed the name right away, but they don't win, guess what? You're an empty stadium with opposing fans infiltrating. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
So their priorities have been in the right spot. So again, like if they decide to change it, we'll report that too. And we'll talk about it then. But right now. Yeah.
All right, John, as always, thank you. Enjoy the off season, and I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Bram.
Flex your business with an American Express Business Gold Card. You'll earn 4 times membership rewards points on your top 2 eligible spending categories, like transit and electronics, each month, on up to $150K in combined purchases per year. Plus, you can now earn 3 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Terms and points cap apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-gold. Amex Business Gold, built for business by American Express.
Build a routine with Ollie that supports your wellness needs. like getting your daily vitamins and minerals with Ollie's multi-gummies, or keeping your mood upbeat with all the vitamin D in Hello Happy. Give your gut health some support with probiotics, and wake up feeling refreshed after taking Ollie Sleep. Do wellness on your terms. Find Ollie at a Walmart or Target near you or at ollie.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
All right, welcome back. While we have a few moments here, and as we're heading towards free agency, can't believe we're talking about that now, like right before February starts. Typically, don't we have this conversation back in November and December? Times have changed. It's awesome. Like, we actually got to follow a football team make a run and be disappointed in the way they played in the NFC Championship game. New world, guys, and I'm loving every minute of it. So we could start to actually do the part that we used to do a month ago, and I hope it's this way in perpetuity, that we don't start talking about these things till we get there. The reality is, though, and I kind of mentioned this, earlier this week, I think the fun part about this team was the ride that they took us on. But the reality is that things are going to change dramatically on this team again. There's going to be a lot of different players on it. Half the team's free agents. A number of the players are the guys that Adam Peters signed prominently. I'm going to get to them. 1-year deal players from other teams: Dante Fowler, Jeremy Chin, Marcus Mariota, Bobby Wagner, Michael Davis, Zach Ertz. The list goes on and on and on. Cleveland Farrell. Like, they weren't all major signings. Biotish got multi-year deal. Dorrance Armstrong did. Frankie Louvu did. A couple of others, but that's it. And then there's the carryovers from the team before, prior to Quinn and Peter showing up. So this is a busy offseason again. The team does have a lot of cap room to work with. They have just about a full arsenal of draft picks to work with all the maneuvers from a year ago. And so this is going to be, once again, a different team. 15 to 20 new players, again, potentially, with the draft class that'll be brought in. Likely some free agent signings. That's 10 to 11 right there on its own. And then probably a few more, because not all of these are going to work out, and they're not going to want all of them back. Let's take a few minutes here and just kind of top line it and talk about all of the free agents that they have and how we're going to think about that moving forward, or at least how I'm thinking about that. I'm not going to speak for them. How I'm thinking about it moving forward. And we'll see, how they react to it. Bobby Wagner. Bobby Wagner is now 34 years old. By the time he's playing next year, he's going to be 35 years old. There is this interesting, he can match London Fletcher for most consecutive 100 plus tackle seasons, if that matters to him. That was a big deal, remember, middle of the season. He brought a tremendous amount of leadership. He's become friends with Jaden Daniels. It's like so interesting to see this kind of first ballot Hall of Famer, or at least certainly Hall of Famer, kind of take him under his wing. I think the work ethic is kind of what brought them together. And they seem to have kind of an odd couple type personality, or maybe not. They're both kind of quiet, actually, and reserved, not really publicly very loud with one another. And maybe behind the scenes, they're different. Anyway, to me, he is a no-brainer. Bring him back. Now, that said, I would think, and I'd like to think, that the likelihood is he doesn't play as many plays as he did a year ago, as he is just getting older. I think you want to try to save him for stretch runs. I think the idea is to maybe rotate him a little bit more than he did. And that's where Jordan McGee comes in. They were really high on him as a draft pick. I remember talking to Adam Peters when I did a show with him last fall, and he said that was the consensus pick for everybody, after Jaden and all that. On like the day 2, day 3 picks, this was the one that everybody in the room agreed upon. That's who they wanted to bring in. He got injured in the preseason. He got injured a couple more times during the regular season. He just did not have the rookie year that they were hoping and expected. And so year 2 is a reboot for him. Hopefully he'll get through it healthy, and we'll get to see what he can do. And maybe that's a rotation, but I'd bring Wagner back. Marcus Mariota will be 32 years old, became a very good mentor, person to lean on for Jaden Daniels. I'm going to assume he wants to come back. I'm going to assume that. Now, we don't know what's going on with the staff, Brian Johnson, Tavita Freeman, David Blau. They're getting some attention now off of what happened this year. Maybe they get hired in different positions. Maybe they're not back. Maybe that changes Mariota's feelings about it. They leaned on him. They utilized him a little bit. They asked him to play a couple of times, especially in Dallas when they pulled Jaden Daniels to let him play in the second half of that game. I think they want him back. Cliff Kingsbury's talked about how he liked working with Mariota, and I think he's the right backup here. And I'd said this back in the spring and the summer. I said, this guy plays his cards right. He could be the primary backup here for a few years if he wants to. Are his starting days behind him? Probably. Is there an offer out there to potentially let him compete for a starting job? Maybe. Would that interest him? Maybe. You have to ask him. But to me, we're re-signing this guy. That's where I am on him. Jeremy Chin, no-brainer to me. Re-sign. They got him on a pretty cheap contract. I would try to get at least a few years. He's going to be 27. He's the physical player they're looking for. I think there are a few things left to be desired in coverage, but that goes along with a guy who's kind of built like a linebacker, flexible player. They like guys who are going to bring it. He brings it. I bring Jeremy Chin back, and I'm looking actually for multi-years. Wagner, I think you go year to year with. Mariota, maybe year to year with. Chin, I want to try to get him locked up 2-3 years. KJ Osborne was signed late when they had the injuries to the receivers, notably Noah Brown. He didn't really play very much, so I don't know how they feel about him. Cleveland Farrell. Cleveland Farrell became part of the rotation, played a lot, missed a lot of practice, was kind of dealing with a knee injury from late in the summer throughout the season. Played with it, though, never really missed any time. Not having a major impact player. They love him for his versatility, and they love him for the locker room leadership that he brings. But we're not seeing a lot of impact from him. So I think his future here probably comes down to, do they draft players at the rush end position? Do they need more backups, veteran leadership? I think he's up in the air to me. Tressway is a free agent this year. He's a no-brainer to me. Bring him back. Dante Fowler. Dante Fowler had an outstanding season in terms of sacks and numbers. He had really been a situational player in Dallas. I don't think I ever really expected him to play as much as he did. Dorrance Armstrong is kind of the steadier presence on the opposite side. I think we can all agree that an upgrade of a premium pass rusher is something that this team is probably going to look for, which would then relegate Fowler back to a different type of role where he would rotate in. And I have a feeling like that would probably be better served for the team. I would bring him back. I like Fowler a lot. I don't know that I think they want him back in the role that he had him in. That's how I would feel about it. So I say, bring him back. He's over 30. He likes playing for Dan Quinn and company. I don't know why you wouldn't want to have him. He plays with his hair on fire. Just, can you get an upgrade at younger talent for a primary pass rusher and have him, rotate in? Michael Davis, corner, over 30. I thought by the middle of the season, he would be the one that would beat out maybe Benjamin St-Juste and play. And it just did, or Emmanuel Forbes at the time, and play. And it did not work out that way. He was kind of the odd man out. They moved Mike Sanders still over. That's kind of an indictment. And so my expectation is he would not be back. Zach Ertz. See, this is a tough one because he became a favorite target of Jaden Daniels. He was everything they had hoped he'd be as a red zone target, everything they'd hoped he'd be as a third, fourth down, make yourself available target. The one thing that's missing for him is he's not an explosive player. Man, the guy knows how to play. Man, he brought it here. Man, he's one of those guys that rekindled his joy. He brought up, I wish I was younger and I could start over with this quarterback because we have a relationship and we could build it. And there's just only so much time. For Ertz to return, this is a very interesting room to me with John Bates and Ben Sinnott. The hope is Ben Sinnott becomes the explosive playmaking tight end, Kyle Juszczyk style versatile player. I didn't see that. So do they look as Sinnott's not going anywhere. He's on a rookie contract and he's just a second round pick. You're going to work with him and try to improve that. Ertz and Bates are interesting. Do you want to find a better primary target? And that's an interesting question. So I would look at it this way. I would have Ertz back if I don't have the option to get a playmaking receiving tight end. If I do, then respectfully, it's probably not a lot of room for him to be there. If you find your explosive playmakers on the edge at receiver or at running back, and you don't find your Kyle Pitts or whoever it may be, then I would bring Ertz back. Good teammate, good locker room leadership, totally bought in, loves it here, wants to play here. I'm down for that. This will be about, can they find a player who can impact the games more than him on a regular basis and get more yards after the catch, be someone that the defense has to deal with differently. They need explosive playmakers. He's not one of them, but that's the least of his attributes. Everything else, leadership, availability, smart player, just clutch player, it's hard to walk away from that, but that's where I kind of am on him. Cornelius Lucas. 33 years old now, great swing tackle. If he wants to come back on another one-year deal, I would do it in a heartbeat. I wouldn't even think about it. Michael Dieter, Trent Scott. I think we can all agree that the depth on the offensive line needs to get better than what it was. And so I think they're going to look to upgrade across those positions. I thought Scott really, really showed up for them in a way where when they really needed him to do so. So, I could see either one of them coming back, but I also could see them going younger or finding similar veterans on the marketplace, and that could be changes. Jamison Crowder missed a lot of the year with injuries, came back. They liked him as a punt returner, made a couple of really clutch plays late in the season for them, specifically in the Philadelphia game and the Philadelphia win that they had in December. I'm sure he still wants to play. I think he comes down to, not unlike Scott and Dieter, since he's a number 3, 4, 5 receiver, are they getting younger? Do they draft people? Are they looking for more younger, explosive players? If so, he's probably edged out. But I don't discount that he can be a very good, still impactful punt returner. Noah Igbenogany. To me, I'm bringing him back. I think that he is, at bare minimum, a backup to Mike Sandristil if he moves back into the slot. What they do at the outside corner position is going to be something to watch because Benjamin St. Juste is up as well. And my gut guess says that he won't be back with them, but I don't really know. But that's my gut guess because he also had kind of fallen out of favor as things kind of progressed. And they had to lean on him to play down the stretch, at least rotationally. But I just, with Marshawn Lattimore here, I feel like that outside corner is something they're going to target potentially in free agency or maybe late in the draft. And that probably means that his days here are done, but we'll see. Olamide Zaccheaus, De'Ami Brown, Noah Brown. They don't fall, any of them, I think, in the Jamison Crowder role. Zaccheaus they love as a competitor. He's only 27. I would bring him back as he can return punts for you. He was better than people said about him. He is always at the ready for them. He's totally satisfied I know he want to be more than this, but if you tell him he's the number 4 or 5 receiver, and when there's injuries, you're going to ask him to step up and play a role for you, bring him back. I would go year to year with him and bring him back. De'Ami's interesting. What will the marketplace be for him? Will there be a better deal on the open market for him than what Washington would be willing to give him? How much do they value him? I think he's one that I think is going to find something on the open market that's probably a little better than what Washington will offer, and we'll wish him the best of luck. I love De'Ami. Noah Brown will come down to what's his health. I mean, he had internal injuries that knocked him out of the rest of the season. As long as he's coming back healthy, I would go year to year and bring him back again. So Zaccheaus Brown, I would expect back. De'Ami, not sure. Nick Bellore is 35, but he's just a maniac on special teams. I'm sure if he wants to come back, he can come back. Sheldon Day was a rotational piece on the defensive line. Let's see if they upgrade there or not. Jeff Driscoll was a very good number 3 quarterback year to year. I'm totally happy having him back. Jeremy McNichols, great special teamer, great glue guy. Loved having him. I think it's going to depend what happens with Brian Robinson. Is there a drafted running back here? Are they going in free agency to find a running back? I think that's going to be interesting. He might get squeezed out there, but if he came back as the number 3 running back, it wouldn't surprise me. Michael Walker was actually very good on special teams for them and in spot duty. I wouldn't be surprised if they bring him back for depth at linebacker. They have to make a decision at kicker, Zane Gonzalez, Austin Seibert, or someone else, and I think it could probably go someone else. Jalen Holmes at 29 had moments. If he's a depth player for them, I wouldn't be surprised if he comes back. John Bates, I would bring back. I think he plays a role in a way that you don't find a lot of guys who are willing to block, inline blocker like that. So I would bring him back unless there's a better deal in the open market for him. Derek Force just didn't play very much. That was somewhat of a surprise to me. He was injured throughout most of the offseason. And so for me, it's hard to see him back because he just didn't get a lot of opportunities here. Chris Rodriguez is an interesting one. Do they bring him back? Do they not? His role never really emerged. He kind of bounced up and down in the practice squad. We'll just have to see. And Kevon Seymour was someone who was signed in the middle of the year for depth at corner. Has been around the league for a long time. He's going to be 32 years old, so I would expect that he probably won't be back or in the same position where he's practice squad, potentially a backup. They got a lot of choices to make. Next week, we'll start to go through, if I have time, on Radio Row, to go through what's out there on the open market to try to help make some of these decisions. But that's just my general thoughts of the large list of free agents that Washington's got to deal with. Back after this, Bram Whiteside Show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.
I think I just won my taxes.
Yeah?
I just switched to H&R Block in about 1 minute. All I had to do was drag and drop last year's return into H&R Block, and bam, my information is automatically there.
So I don't have to go digging around for all my old papers to switch?
Nope.
Sounds like we just leveled up our tax game.
Switching to H&R Block is easy. Just drag and drop your last return. It's better with Block.
All right, welcome back. Just a few minutes on the land of Ted. Now that I'm out of football brain, back in the real world with all of us, the Commanders all the time. Caps and Wizards both play last night. The numbers from the Wizards game are... this is why I'm not paying attention to them. They're so outrageously awful. It's hard to have any kind of credibility. And so, I mean, I didn't watch any of it. I watched the Caps. But these numbers, I just have to repeat these numbers because they're so nuts. The 5 starters, George Kuzma, Valanciunas, Koulibaly. The best plus-minus of any of them was Jordan Poole at minus 22. He scored 19 points on 5 of 15 shooting. Kuzma goes 3 of 14. He's minus 24. George is minus 35. Bub off the bench, is minus 25. They lose 134-96. The Lakers scored almost 80 in the first half. I mean, it's just and this is a home game. I mean, it's so outrageously terrible. And they're sitting over there celebrating it because it's just another loss en route towards hopefully the number 1 lottery pick and apparently the answers to all their problems. So, okay, guys, again, I don't know. Maybe I just saw the name Lakers and was like, all right, what'd they do? And I looked. It's a horror film. As for the Capitals, they continue to, I don't know, surprise me is the right word for it. They got to get all the awards. I mean, at this point, a little more than midway through the season, to have the most points in the East, to be this far clear. Last night was the epitome of... This is the type of team that's got staying power. I mean, they're playing whatever, average team Ottawa. It's on the road, but it's 5th game of a 5-game road trip, most of which took place in Western Canada. And they come back and they play this one, and they'd won 3 of the first 4. So it's just house money now. And it's just rhythms of a sport. They're just not going to have it. And they didn't. They gave up a penalty shot on the power play. They gave up a shorthanded goal 38 seconds later. The game's over. And they were lucky they got an overturned goal, and the game's over, and they get to the third period, and they're down 4-2, and they don't care. They come back anyway. Ovechkin scores again. They get it into overtime. They lose, but they salvage a point out of it on a night where they could have just totally checked out, been like, we're done here. We'll see you guys back at home. We've done our part on the road, and that's not how they're rolling this year. So, mark this one down again. It's not they beat the Senators in late January. So what? The Senators are a marginal playoff team. Nobody thinks they're a contender. So what? Washington beats them all the time. Nope. 5th of a 5-game road trip. They get points out of it, even though they're down by 2 twice and gave up 2 shorthanded goals. Listen, they could have easily just packed it in and said, all right, we'll get them next time, boys. And they didn't again. Carberry's coach of the year. I don't know what's going on with the juju with this team, but it's pretty amazing. I just took a ride with a great chemistry team. 2 of them, actually, the Spirit, too. Like, boy, the vibes are good around town these days. And the Capitals are the epitome of it now, of the teams that are still playing. All right, everybody, have an awesome weekend. I'll talk to you on Monday before I go to New Orleans for Radio Row. So we'll do one more home show before we head out to Radio Row in New Orleans, and I'll talk to you then. Have a great weekend. Bray Boys and Show, ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.